Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, today I want to talk about the secret behind the cursed blades and Kaido's factories. But before we get into it, thanks to Game Changer and Play With Interactive, this video is sponsored by Warlords Awakening. If you would like to check it out, link for it will be in the description. Warlords Awakening is a Japanese anime-inspired Korean MMORPG set to release in October. This game plays a lot like many other MMORPGs that you've seen, but its flair or spice comes from its Diablo-like gameplay. There's something inherently satisfying from destroying legions upon legions of enemies. There are 5 different classes and 4 different races to choose from. Each class has 3 different weapons, each which gives you different move sets along with skill trees. Unlike some other games, pets are vitally important. You level them up just as you would your own character, and each different kind of pet provides you with stat boosts, depending on the pet and its rarity. But this game is not without a little bit of controversy. Warlords Awakening is not actually a new game, even though it's coming out in October and is currently in its beta testing period. Warlords Awakening was originally released called ELOA, and that game failed. The reason for this seems to be mainly twofold. First off, the original developers of the game before it failed, it was then repurchased by Play With Interactive, didn't do many updates to the game, they didn't provide new content, and that frustrated the player base. What's even more irritating about this, as when it came out in 2015, the game was initially incredibly popular. The other issue which drove the game into the dirt was that it was pay to win. Even though it was free to play, you absolutely had to buy items within the game in order to be competitive, and that was the final straw. But the game is really fun. Play With saw a lot of potential, so they bring in this game back, trying to fix the mistakes the previous developers made. It is no longer pay to win. It is $12 on Steam. But in-game purchases are absolutely not necessary, and Play With will listen to the fanbase and regularly update it. But anyway guys, I had the opportunity to play this game, and in my experience it's really fun. A link for it will be in the description. But back to the topic at hand. As you guys know, following the Wano arc, for some reason it is important that Kaido has factories located in the area of Curry, potentially others as well. I was rereading Wano up until this point in time, mainly to look at the geography itself to see if I could figure out how Wano worked, like how Luffy was able to enter, where the other Straw Hats might be, and what contributes to all of the oddities. But I actually stumbled upon something that was more directly related to the factories. When I was looking at the geography of Wano, I noticed that the factories only seemed to come out of outcroppings of rock. I would like to call them hills, but they're not really hills, they're too awkwardly shaped. But if you look for the factories and where the smoke is coming from, every single time Oda draws them, they come out of these bits of rock that stick up out of the ground. And in fact, if you look at the town of Leftovers where they were, this was actually, it appears to be on top of one of these rocks, which is why it was so smoky and polluted. So yeah, the factories stick out of rock. As I reread further, this made complete sense because they called the factories quarries, a place where you would harvest rock, or some kind of material or mineral that would be within rock. So Kaido's factories harvest rock. I figure that these factories will become important in some way, and so for some reason there's some mineral that Kaido wants. And this is when it finally clicked for me, something that is incredibly obvious in hindsight when you remember something from over 100 chapters ago. If you guys recall back to Dressrosa, remember that the Revolutionary Army was there dealing with or researching, acquiring intel on the weapons that Doflamingo was distributing. These seemed for the most part to be regular weapons, guns and swords and axes, that sort of thing. That's the impression that I get. But Koala noticed something interesting, an interesting property of the weapons. They contained trace amounts of a very special mineral. They called it drunken iron ore, alternatively translated as liqueur or liqueur iron ore. For some reason, the Revolutionary Army deemed it important to trace back the origins of the manufacturing of these weapons, and they specifically noted that this trace mineral was their biggest clue because it wasn't found in many places. And at the time, that's pretty much all we had to go on for this drunken iron ore. It's for some reason important, it has something to do with the Revolutionary Army and Doflamingo, and that's pretty much what we have. Fast forward to the Wano arc, you have quarries, factories sticking out of rocks, It just seems incredibly likely that the thing that Kaido is trying to get out of these factories within Wano is drunken iron ore. It makes even more sense because of the connection between Doflamingo and Kaido. If we assume this to be true, then who the Revolutionary Army is looking for is Kaido. Doflamingo might have been distributing the weapons, but Kaido is the one producing them, again with trace amounts, it seems, of drunken iron ore. And I think the looming question here, the big question is how is this all important? What is drunken iron ore? What qualities does it have that make it so interesting? Why is Oda specifically naming it? And why is Kaido using it? And why does it matter if Kaido is making them? They are just simple weapons, right? I think this all leaves us with more questions than answers. There still seems to be some secret here that we're missing. And so for me, when I initially discovered this, it was just a fun fact. It seemed likely, but its importance seemed uncertain. But as I was reading the One Piece Wikipedia page on liqueur iron ore, drunken iron ore, there's one little detail that really stuck out to me. And it's low-key. The Romanized name of drunken iron ore. Drunken iron ore is obviously English, and they have the Japanese name written in kanji, but the Romanized name is how you would pronounce that kanji in sort of English. And it's called Kitetsu Ko. And so guys, this should strike you as interesting as it did for me, because there is a character in Wano with the name Kitetsu. He's an incredibly famous bladesmith, maker of Zoro's sword and two others that are cursed. Oh, and by the way, it seems pretty likely to me that Kaido has quarries in Wano that are extracting, at least in some part, Kitetsu Ko. Is this a coincidence or not? Is Oda hinting at a connection between drunken iron ore and Kitetsu's cursed blades? And you know guys, this is even more curious than I've painted it out to be at this moment. If you take the kanji which Oda used in One Piece to name drunken iron ore, and you ask the Japanese person to pronounce it or Romanize it, they would not do so as Kitetsu Ko naturally. What Oda did was he clarified when he introduced it. This is how it should be Romanized. It turns out that the first character is not normally pronounced as Ki, like in Kitetsu. That pronunciation is outdated, it is old. Perhaps just the same as how the people in Wano use outdated words and pronunciations. Not only is drunken iron ore called Kitetsu Ko, but Oda had to jump through hoops in order to give it that name. He had to think about it, he had to choose it specifically. It is not natural. And to me, it does read as a clue. I do believe that there is a connection between drunken iron ore, Wano, and Kitetsu. Now let's talk a little bit about Kitetsu and his cursed blades. So typically this isn't always the case, but typically swords are made of steel, which is usually mainly comprised by carbonized iron. And if we're already assuming that Wano contains drunken iron ore, then it would make sense for Kitetsu's blades, if he ever made them, to also contain small amounts to large amounts of this drunken iron ore. Now guys, here's where we need to make a jump in logic, and the reason that I'm making this is because I think that Oda has laid out clues of a relationship between drunken iron ore and Kitetsu's blades, meaning that this connection is in some way important. I have to assume it's important. And the only way that I can rationalize that is if drunken iron ore is at least partly responsible for the curses in Kitetsu's cursed blades. And Zoro has described this curse in a way that is tangible, in a way that we can understand. The swords are, for lack of a better term, hard to control and bloodthirsty. Zoro basically describes a sword that has a destructive will of its own, and it does take him some effort to control that. Now there's two characters in the kanji which describes the Kitetsu swords. The second kanji basically means sword, or slice or pierce. But the first kanji has several different possible translations. Oni, ogre, demon, spirit of the deceased, or an ogre-like person, implying it contains some nasty entity or enforces some sort of control on the person wielding the sword, or perhaps, and most interestingly, it contains the spirit of somebody who has died. And that's essentially what I want to speculate about the Kitetsu blades. I wonder if, in some way, drunken iron ore can come to possess the angered spirits of those the blade has killed. We know that souls exist in the world of One Piece, Big Mom being the most recent and obvious proof of this. But of course there is a lot more, from Brook to a lot of different speculations about the origin of Devil Fruit. Perhaps Drunken Iron Ore has a property which allows it to absorb these spirits, thus creating the curse. These spirits will manifested within the sword. Even to the connection between souls and Devil Fruit, you'll notice that whenever the Devil Fruit seems to get control over a user, for instance in the case of Chopper and Monster Point, they're not happy, they're angry, they're demon, they're ogre, they're Oni-like. And they do seem to have a will of their own when not being controlled by their user. I do think that the Kitetsu Blades could have some things in common with Devil Fruit, obviously without the magical powers. And also bear in mind that just like the Kitetsu Blades, Devil Fruits are stated to be cursed. But why is all of this important? Why is it that the Revolutionary Army is hunting down these weapons that Doflamingo was distributing, perhaps Kaido was making? Where's Oda actually going in the story with this? Why did Kaido choose Wano as a place to mine iron ore? That perhaps happens to be drunken iron ore, a very rare kind, not found in many places. Perhaps the simple answer here is that Kaido and the Revolutionary Army are aware of what the weapons do to people. The weapons are unique, special, and dangerous. Containing trace amounts of drunken iron ore, the weapons are all cursed. And in the hands of somebody who cannot control this curse, it leads to insane bloodlust and destruction and death. As we know, Kaido is hell-bent on destroying the world. From this perspective, I think that it makes a lot of sense that he would want to distribute and create cursed weapons to help mankind kill itself. But anyway guys, I thought that there was a lot of curious connections here, and at the very least provides an explanation for something that I have not really seen anybody explain adequately. What is the role of drunken iron ore? But as always, I'm curious as to what you guys think about this, whether you agree with anything that I had to say, you disagree, just share your thoughts. Like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video, make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.